County 911. Where's your emergency? Hello?
You there?
I'm here. What is your emergency?
There's no emergency. I'm at a standoff with the police on Arrigo Boulevard.
Okay, and what is your name?
Allen Fourtunia.
Okay, Alan, what's going on? Are you the one that's shooting at the police, Alan?
You bet.
Okay. Why are you doing that?
Well, it's a long story, sweetheart.
Okay, well, tell me what's going on, okay?
In 2005, while I was employed at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, I had a supervisor that came after me and targeted me, and his name was Stephen G. SWAN. Well, this guy was trying to make a name for himself, and he went through the craftsmanship, one name at a time. Please don't try to distract me. I'm armed and I'm aware. This guy kept coming after me, until eventually he got me laid off as a threat to the nation under the Patriot Act. Now, that lasted for about 2 years, and they gave me a retirement. You see, this guy was a narcissistic individual to do anything he could to get ahead. I had been in a leave without pay status. Now, some people say I was crazy. Okay, fair enough. I could have spent my whole rest of my life in silence, which would have proved them wrong, but I would have not got any restitution. Steve SWAN was up for retirement. I went to Walmart at the end of the street, and I saw him there, and I ran the son of a bitch over.
Okay, so he was able to retire?
Not for another year.
So you ran over him at Walmart today?
Yes. You know what?
What?
This was really just happenstance. I didn't go looking for the guy.
Right.
But
you just saw him there?
I saw him there. I want it all documented, and it's going to take a lot of time. If you tell the police to pull back, I'll tell you my story, and this will end up happily. I won't be shooting at officers again. But the next time I see a police officer draw a 40 caliber sidearm on me again, I will shoot to kill.
Okay. Mr. Fourtunia?
Yes.
Okay. The officers on the scene want you to come out the back door with your hands up.
That ain't happening.
Okay. They want to resolve it, and they want to hear your story.
They're not resolving shit, because in order to hear my story, I'm going to lose all my pensions and go to jail for life. So you might as well consider me suicidal. You there?
I'm here. I told the dispatcher that you want them to the street.
Let's get personal, because I know how this works. What's your first name?
My name is Linda.
Hi, Linda. My name's Alan.
Okay, Alan. Were you in the Air Force?
I was in the Air National Guard, but I was active duty Air Force. You point this out on your report there, darling. I got 50 years working for the United States government, and I am a 2-time war veteran. You make sure that gets in there. You know, I never really wanted this to happen this way.
Well, you know, you're the one that can make it happen a different way.
No. The United States government pushed me into a corner because they wanted to prove a point, and now I'm going to prove a point. Steve SWAN and all these other shop supervisors were coming after employees and trying to teach everybody a lesson.
So they were coming after other employees?
Absolutely. In other words, Leo Faydu and the supervisors that were under his command created a hostile work environment. Now, I know you're keying in on all those negative thoughts, kill myself, and all this other stuff.
Well, is that what you're saying, that you're going to kill yourself?
Depends.
What does it depend on?
How this ends up.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you not to hurt anyone else. And I don't want you to hurt yourself either.
I'm not going to hurt any civilians. This is between me and the police department.
Okay, so what are you saying exactly about the police?
If there's any kind of a breach on this house, it's going to end badly.
Okay. Are you the only one inside?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Is anybody inside that's injured?
No. You might as well start clearing the neighborhood, because this house rig for an explosion.
What kind of explosion?
I'm not going to tell you that, but it's directional.
And when you say it's directional, what does that mean? It's some sort of propellant or what? What are you talking about?
I tell you what, I got 50 years all working for the military, 27 as a civilian on nuclear subs, and 16 working for the Air Force. You figure it out.
Okay. Well, I don't have military experience, so I don't really know.
That's unfortunate for you. I'm just going to tell you this. There's enough explosives in here right now to where things are going to be very bad. And I know you're calling SWAT. I tell you what, give me 5 minutes, call me back. Cops come in here, it's going to turn into a shootout. I'm armed with the 223.
What is your phone number?
You should have it on file.
Okay.
It's hardly uncommon for people to have an issue with their employer or boss. The very nature of working for somebody else often leads to hatred and resentment towards those that call the shots and have the power. But for 59-year-old Allen Fourtunia, he was no longer willing to be told what to do. The year was 2014, and in what he perceived to be years and years of systematic abuse by his employers, he refused to take it anymore. After bottling up his considerable animosity to the point of explosion, he erupted in one single, unprovoked moment of madness, and he unbelievably mowed down his former supervisor, Stephen SWAN. He then called 911 to explain his long and complex story of events as the waiting police circled his house. Allen Fourtunia had had a long and varied career which had seen him spend significant time serving the United States government. He had over 30 years of military service that even included 2 separate tours of duty. However, Fourtunia had something of a checkered employment past, and it was evidently clear that he had some significant problems with previous employers and his direct line of command. As the dramatic incident drew to a close at Allen's own property, he would divulge the reasons for his actions in great detail to the hapless call operator, who was largely powerless to do anything to help or resolve the situation. It almost appeared as though the 911 call formed something of a recorded suicide note, with Fourtunia declaring on multiple occasions that he was not leaving the house alive. With that in mind, and the knowledge that the police were planning their tactical approach after following him home after the slaying of his old supervisor, it appeared that he was very much realistic about the situation that he was in, and how the ending would likely play out. As a result, he started the call demanding that it be recorded and the details be taken down. This was his story, and he insisted that somebody should listen to what he had to say. As the call begins, the operator routinely asks, 911, what is your emergency? As an introduction, like with every call they take. But Allen Fourtunia calmly and bluntly advises that there is no emergency, just that he happens to be in a standoff with the police and is currently shooting at officers. Apparently already somewhat aware of the developing situation given the police presence already on the ground, the call handler asks why he's doing what he's doing. It's at that point that Allen Fourtunia reveals that it's a long story, as he prepares to reveal the issues that have led him to these actions. His story begins nearly a full decade earlier, at a time when he was working at a naval shipyard. He insists that whilst working at the shipyard, he had one specific supervisor who would continually come after him and made a point of targeting him. That supervisor was called Stephen SWAN. As the call handler looks to draw more information out of Allen, he interrupts his story to warn her emphatically not to try and distract him. He is calling from his home, with police units surrounding the house while he is on the call. He pointedly reminds her that he is armed and aware. Allen claims that it was Stephen SWAN who eventually got him laid off from his position as a threat to the nation under the Patriot Act. Obviously an extremely serious allegation, Fourtunia would ultimately be given his retirement against his will a couple of years later, and as far as he was concerned, it all came as a result of this supervisor that he claimed had it in for him. He went on to say that Stephen SWAN was a narcissist who would stop at nothing to get ahead and trample over anyone in his way. At least that's how Allen saw it. The details in the story then start to become a little convoluted and complex, but the gist of the tale appeared to be that Stephen SWAN and another supervisor, called Alan Beck, were investigated by the Navy a few years later after a series of complaints similar to that of Allen Fourtunia's. Fourtunia was adamant that SWAN had targeted others, just like he had him. After the investigation, however, the two supervisors in question received 2 weeks paid leave. SWAN admitted to micromanaging, but as far as Allen was concerned, this didn't scratch the surface of what he'd done, and he felt the so-called punishment of 2 weeks' leave was an insult. Meanwhile, he himself had been on an enforced leave of absence without pay at the time, and many people at his workplace believe he was somewhat crazy. But the resentment had grown to such an extent that he could no longer sit quietly. He felt so strongly about what he felt was a gross miscarriage of justice and a deeply personal insult from Stephen SWAN that what we learned next came as no great surprise, as shocking as it was. He jumped forward in his story to the present tense and the alarming events that had occurred just prior to the call. With Stephen SWAN due to take retirement in just 1 year's time, Allen Fourtunia just coincidentally happened to see him at the local Walmart just down the road. Upon identifying him and having a second to process his thoughts and the year's worth of pent-up anger and frustration, he jammed his foot onto the accelerator and coldly ran over Stephen SWAN. Not content with that, he then got out of his vehicle and proceeded to pummel SWAN on the ground. The stark revelation that was revealed by Allen so matter-of-factly and determinedly appeared to shock the call handler. There was a long period of silence immediately after the confession, while she apparently tries to process the information she's just heard. At this point, Fourtunia doubles down on his intention to be heard and insists that she is going to listen to every last thing he has to say, and he wants it all documented. After reflecting on how all this came about, it appeared as though he momentarily lost sight of his current circumstance, and so seems to jolt back to his current situation and demands the call handler to tell the police to fall back to the street. He confesses once again that he's suicidal and categorically won't be leaving the house alive. He threatens to warn the police that if they make a move or try to enter his property, he is fully armed and will shoot to kill. A bold statement for anyone at any time, and something that the 911 operator obviously had to take seriously. But that wasn't his only threat. Fourtunia insisted he had the house rigged with directional explosives, and should anyone encroach at any time, then, in his words, the outcome would be very bad. He even suggests that they clear the neighborhood as a precaution. All this elevated the sense of desperation and urgency with which the police needed to deal with the situation. After insisting the call handler give him 5 minutes before calling him back, Fourtunia hung up the phone. A SWAT team had been called from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department in order to negotiate with Fourtunia. With so much potentially at stake for officers on the scene, as well as local neighbors and residents, they had to be cautious. But by the time the SWAT officers entered the property, they found Allen Fourtunia had already killed himself with a single gunshot wound to the head. Investigating officers also found a homemade bomb inside the property that had ceased to detonate. As for the supervisor that had been the focus of so much anger, and the victim of the terrible assault at Walmart, well, it was no positive outcome there either. Stephen SWAN had succumbed to his injuries after being viciously run over, and he would later die on his arrival at the hospital. After one man had felt wronged and struggled to deal with the fallout of his sacking, he ultimately held a sinister and dangerous grudge for many years. When he happened to spot the person to cause all that emotion, he instinctively mowed him down and took his life, before taking his own shortly after, all over a workplace dispute.